Case expressions let you implement a kind of inline conditional logic to return a value. It's somewhat similar to the ternary operator that you can find in some programming languages. And you can use case statements in your select, where, or order by clauses. Basically anywhere where you're allowed to use an expression and that expression returns a value. There's two forms that the case statement comes in, simple and searched. The searched form is the most general and flexible way, and so I'm going to show that first, and then I'll show how the simple form is just a minor twist on that. To demonstrate the searched form, what I'm going to do is write a query that looks at the film table and returns a column for the title, column for the length, and a third column that uses the case expression. And what I'm going to put in this column is, when the length of the film is less than 60, I want this column to say short. When the length of the film is greater than 60, but less than 120 minutes, I want the text to say long. And when the length of the film is greater than 120 minutes, I want this column to say very long. And I can use a case statement to accomplish all this. So let's get started. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll come back and I'll introduce this new third column with a case expression. And I'll say case when length is less than or equal to 60, then I want the text to be short. When length is greater than 60 and length is less than or equal to 120 minutes, then long. And when the length is greater than 120, then I want the text to be very long. And then what I have to do is write end to end the case expression. So this case expression that starts with the case keyword and ends with the end keyword describes a single column in our select clause. And because I want a nice name for that column, I want a friendly name, I'm also going to alias it. So I'll alias it as length description. I can now run this query. And let's have a look at some of the output and see if the query did what we expected. So Academy Dinosaur, which has a length of 86 minutes, got the length description as long, which is correct. Ace Goldfinger, with a length of 48 minutes, got the description of short, which is also correct. The way the case expression works is it goes through each of the different conditions in the order that they're listed in, and as soon as one of those conditions evaluates to true, then it outputs a value. So in this case, when we say case, when length is less than or equal to 60, if we're looking at a film that has a length of less than or equal to 60, it immediately returns the value short, and this case expression is done. If that's not true, however, it falls down and it looks at the next condition, which is if the length is greater than 60 and the length is less than or equal to 120. So in your case expression, it goes line by line through the different conditions until one evaluates to true. There's an optional else clause that you can introduce as well, which is where you can specify the value that's going to get returned if none of the conditions evaluated to true. So here we can make use of that. Let's say else unknown. So if in evaluating the length of the films, none of these conditions evaluated to true, then the output would be unknown. That would be the text in the length description column. If you don't include an else and none of the conditions evaluate to true, then what will be output is actually null. So again, just to repeat that, the else part is optional, but if you don't include it, then you'll just get null if none of the other conditions evaluate to true. I mentioned it at the beginning of the video, but it bears repeating that you can use the case expression in a variety of different places. So here I've used the case expression in the select clause, but you can also use it in the where, order by, and a few other places as well. This is demonstrating the more general form of the case expression. There's also a simple form of the case expression. And to demonstrate that, what I'm going to do is write a query where when a film's rating is G, then I'm going to output kid-friendly. When a film's rating is PG, I'll also output kid-friendly. And if it's anything else, then I want to output not kid-friendly. And when you're working with the simple form, what you do is up here next to the case keyword, you enter in the column that you want to perform an equality match on. So in this case, what we're checking is the rating column. And what I want to say is when that rating is G, then I want to output kid-friendly. And when the rating is PG, then I want to output kid-friendly as well. Otherwise, I want to output not kid-friendly. So I'll just leave the else clause and I'll say else not kid-friendly. And I'll update the description of that to be kid-friendly rating. Let's run that. And what I'll do, just to make it easy to check our results, is I'll go back up here and I'll add the rating as a column in our output as well. Okay, so let's assess the results. When the rating was PG, then it output kid-friendly. When the rating was G, it output kid-friendly. Otherwise, it seems we do get not kid-friendly. So the simple form of the case expression is just a very minor variation from the searched form. All that happened was that after the case keyword, we put the column that we wanted to perform an equality match on. And then after the when clause, we didn't have to specify a general condition. We were able just to put the literal match, so G or PG. And you can convert from the simple form to the general form as follows. You can just go up here, you can get rid of rating from there, and you can say when rating equals G, when rating equals PG. And so now you're back to the searched form again, and it's exactly equivalent to the simple form. So just a simple variation happening behind the scenes to save you a little bit of typing. One thing to be careful about when using the simple form is if you're checking against null. Let's say you had a null rating here, it would always evaluate to unknown when you're doing an equality comparison. So if you wanted to put in a condition that handled when the rating is null, you would have to use the searched form, and you would have to write when rating is null, then, and whatever output you wanted for when the rating is null. Okay, jump in and have a go at the exercises. And then also, this is actually the last video in this chapter. And what I've got at the end of this chapter then are some quite challenging exercises. They are worth doing. You'll learn a lot attempting them, and you'll learn a lot looking at the solutions as well. So make sure you give them a really good go.